Welcome. Hello, everyone. IndyCar's 4 for 4 this year. It's just got to be said. I guess I don't need my headphones, do I? I keep forgetting I'm not on the podcast. The podcast, by the way, will be out Tuesday because Kyle has a prior obligation, which I could not possibly get him out of, which is to say it's his girlfriend's birthday. So, first of all, happy birthday, Kylie. And I hope you enjoyed Monday. Monday is also May 1st, which is going to be awesome. I have a video that's coming out, will premiere. It's a short video, but if you remember last year, I did a trailer for Indy 500 month. I've done that again. And I'll just say this, I think it's, and again, I'm the person who edited it. So like, take what I say with a grain of salt, but I think the video tomorrow, if you are an Indy 500 fan, you are going to absolutely love. It's short, but it will get you ready for cars on the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Oval. I'll just put it that way. That premieres at noon tomorrow. And just to, I don't want to give away any secrets, but this month of May on this channel is going to be absolutely awesome. My goal is to scare a few people, and I think we're going to be able to do that. The production quality is going to take another step up. Our video outputs are going to take a step up. We're going to double down on history of the Indianapolis 500. There's a lot of things that we're going to be doing throughout this month of May. Obviously, it's a shorter amount of time that we're going to see cars on the oval than I know I would like. Maybe some people would like the Indy 500 to be a one weekend affair, but not me. But even though you're not going to have cars on the oval the entire time, at least on this channel, you're going to feel like they are. That's my goal. I think we'll be able to accomplish it. Our team's already working really hard. One of the great things about May is I can actually get people to come help me out and work with me. Because it's tough to talk people into going to Barber, for example. But it's not hard to talk people into or incentivize people to come work for you in the month of May for Indianapolis. So, yeah, I'm excited. I did have a couple of super chats here that I want to get to real quick. Unlike the podcast, we're gonna just be, if a super chat comes in, I'm gonna talk about it. So, Jack LB says, "What the hell has happened with Meyer Shank Racing?" That's a great question. And, correlation doesn't always mean causation, but, and we're talking about an IMSA team versus an IndyCar team, but you have to think that the penalty that they got after winning the Rolex 24 for the tire manipulation has had something to do with Meyer Shank Racing, even if it's just on a mental level, because yeah, you're right. They have been nowhere this year. And I'm wondering what will happen in the offseason with that team. I think that's a team that you might see make some moves to try to move some other drivers in there. I think Simon Pagenaud might be safe. Elio Castroneves, I think, is the one that I would see a move being made with, unless he wins the Indy 500. I think he's even been quoted as saying that. Cole Bayer says, "Gonna hurt someone one day if a car is stopped on track and the caution is not thrown. Don't care if it's during pit stops." Okay, yes, this is going to be a discussion, Cole, a little bit later in the stream, but I've said it before, and I will say it again a little bit more articulately than I will right now, hopefully later in the stream. But long story short, if it deserved a caution in the first place, either bring the caution out or don't, right? To me, with a yellow flag, there's no in between. You either need a full course yellow or you don't need a full course yellow. And if you need a full course yellow, that means the track should be full course yellow. And I get it. We're trying to be fair. We're trying to keep everybody, happy to a certain extent. Sure. Would the race have been just fine without that? Probably. But we did get a good race today. Tara says, "The cup race being rained out made me think. Did someone know today's race was going to be a 10 out of 10? And everyone wanted to watch it." I hope so. I hope a lot of NASCAR fans tuned into this because outside of that caution flag, this was, a Cup Series race back when they allowed Cup Series races to have true strategy in them. You had tire management, you had fuel management, you had cars on fast strategies, you had cars on slow strategies. You had comers and goers. You had a lot of unpredictability that was fairly natural within the race. And so I sure hope the NASCAR rain out meant something. But the thing that I've kind of realized over the last few years, and nothing has personified it more than that IndyCar NASCAR doubleheader at Indianapolis and being on the ground covering those races the last couple of years. I don't see the same two faces twice. The IndyCar crowd and the NASCAR crowd is completely different people one day to the next day. There's very few people who are at both races. So, yeah, to a certain extent, that's a financial issue. But sometimes I just think that NASCAR and IndyCar fans are just too far apart to really cross over in great numbers. So, sure, NASCAR has 3 million people, but that doesn't necessarily mean those are 300 million 3 million general racing fans. Those are either, legacy NASCAR fans, NASCAR only fans, or casual sports fans who only know the word NASCAR. And they just kind of go, oh, I'll turn on the race, right? Let's actually talk about the race, shall we? Because I will get back to the caution issue. First of all, I want to thank everybody for showing up. We got 247 people already here. It will probably peak around 500. Last week's one I did, or 2 weeks ago for Long Beach, peaked around 500. So hopefully you guys enjoy this stream. Didn't go to Barber. I was kind of on the fence about it, and just kind of said, do I want to focus on prepping for the Indy 500, or do I want to, kill myself and go to Barber? Because the travel is tough, especially when you're doing everything yourself, right? And this was a weekend where I was probably going to be on my own from a coverage standpoint. I have some great people who I can call up to work for me. I've got a lot of them who are going to be helping me out in May, and had some great help from Luke Edwards, and then Kyle and Joe at Indy this year. But sometimes hard to do a full quality show as a one-man band on the road. So I just kind of said, can I make the month of May coverage better by staying at home? And the answer was yes. It didn't help that I got sick pretty badly earlier this week. I came home from Texas, got sick, went to the IndyCar test, got sick. I guess I need to drink more emergency. So one thing I want to start off with is a shout out to NBC, because for whatever reason, and remember, I haven't watched, this is the second race I've watched on television since Laguna Seca of 2021, or sorry, Long Beach of 2021. That was the season finale. And I had some criticism of the NBC broadcast. It wasn't a lot. It wasn't super heavy criticism, but I was a little bit underwhelmed. And I'm not saying that I had any kind of influence over it, not at all, but it seemed like NBC stepped on the gas for their coverage, and for me, it just felt higher quality. It felt like Hinch and Townsend and Lee were really loose in the booth, which I loved. It was more like the Sam Posey, Uncle Bobby, Paul Page booth, where they were just arguing the entire time, which is entertaining. They did great with graphics. They were doing rap music with Pato and introducing him, showing driver actual real life images of the drivers in a studio with their name and number. I thought that was great. They were showing the cars, when they would go to break, they would show the cars, and that's something that TV just refuses to do, or has refused to do up until this point. But they were actually showing what cars the drivers were driving. That was great. So good for NBC. I thought I just want to think they did a good job. I'm going to give them credit. I think I don't know why 4 races into the season they just started cooking, but I'm here for it. I'm here for it. And even they did some good jobs of talking about storylines, which I'll get into at least one of those storylines, which I touched on in my 100 Days to Indy review. And some people got mad at me for pointing out, despite the fact that it is a huge dramatic story within IndyCar racing that seems to be somewhat ignored. but actually got touched on by NBC today. Grosjean on the pole, blew an engine in practice, and this is something that I picked up on, and I haven't heard too many people say yet, though NBC kind of walked up to that line in talking about it when they were talking about Will Power having a fairly mileaged out engine. I think a big key, not the total key to why Romain Grosjean was so strong after that engine blew, because I do think Romain has had a great season thus far, and he's been driving as well as he ever has. But when you put a new engine in, and everyone else has been running all their engines for the first 4 races of the season, well, no wonder he had a 10th advantage in qualifying. I think it's reasonable to assume engines that have almost 5,000 miles on them versus an engine that has 5 miles on it is going to go a lot faster. And then I think that's part of the reason why we saw Grosjean have such an advantage this weekend over the rest of the field. I don't think it was totally the reason, but I think it was a big part of it. So that was something that just didn't seem mentioned. But we know Grosjean's a good qualifier. He's been a good qualifier this year. And, you know, you look at the Indy GP coming up next. That's another race that he's qualified very well at. I thought he was going to win Long Beach this year. We didn't see that. I think it's coming, though. I think Romain Grosjean's win is coming. I thought it was going to be today, to be honest with you. And again, we'll get into the strategy here in a second. But had the strategy, had it gone green to the end, I don't think anyone was touching Romain Grosjean today. He was absolutely going to win his first IndyCar race today. Circumstances were really the main reason why Romain Grosjean did not win the race today. 2-stop versus 3-stop. This is a discussion at Barber, which makes the Barber race more interesting than it typically would be if it was just everybody was on the same strategy, which I appreciate. I think the tire company, Firestone, IndyCar with the race distance have done a good job of creating this race or making this race have its own unique vibe, its own unique strategy. I think that's a good thing because there are some road course races, Indy GP 1 and 2, that really struggle to put on good races because, you know, everyone seems to be, the entire field seems to be on the fuel save strategy and not the go strategy, and that makes it boring. I think the two recipes for an exciting road course race is if everyone's on the go strategy, or if half the field is on the go strategy and half the field is on the conserve strategy. If the whole field is on the conserve strategy, it sucks. If the entire field had committed to a 3-stop strategy today, the race would have been absolutely awful. And that's maybe, unless it rains, what we're expecting at the Indy road course, and probably why that race, you know, isn't as beloved as you know, like Barber, because Barber's races, for the most part, have been excellent. I think all the way back to 2012, really since then, you know, and we're talking 2010 and 2011, the first 2 races, maybe they were a little bit mid, but I think the 2012 race was great. And then all the way through, we've had notable things to talk about at Barber. In particular, Alex Palou came to race today, which was great. In fact, that opening lap was absolutely spectacular, with Alex Palou, Romain Grosjean, and Pato O'Ward being 3 wide coming out of the hairpin there. And I'm just sitting there going, we're going 3 abreast on lap 1 at Barber. I mean, I was all about it. It was great. Like, I'm not going to complain about that, but that was surprising to me. It's a shame. It's a shame that battle didn't continue. I know, because that was the problem, was a lot of the guys up front were on the fuel save strategy, the 2-stop. And, you know, Palou had a couple of stabs at Grosjean. I think that, you know, if he had been let loose maybe 1 or 2 more laps than he was, he could have gotten Grosjean, but he had to commit to the strategy that he was on. I understand, and wasn't able to pass Grosjean. And a lot of those guys stayed in, as Marty Reed would say, at lockstep for most of the race. But then we get into the drama, which was the Dixon versus Pato drama, which apparently NBC reported, and God bless America, I hope Vice filmed this when this happened. They said that Pato went up to Dixon to talk about the incident at Long Beach. Now, this was not an apology. He was just going up to say, look, man, I'm going to talk to you like a man, kind of like what happened with Grosjean and McLaughlin, and have a a man-to-man discussion. We're not going to necessarily agree, but hopefully we'll have respect at the end of it. Pato went to hug Dixon, and Dixon declined. Dixon said, "You're not hugging me, son. We ain't on that level." And that goes back to, I see Taurus's, actually, I'm going to read this because it's exactly what I'm about to get to. Taurus had a super chat which says, what you said earlier about NBC doing a better story, do you think IndyCar working with Vice making 100 Days Indy has given IndyCar/NBC some ideas how to put a good narrative together? Not yet. Maybe they listened to some of the feedback from the first episode of 100 Days to Indy, because to me, and I've said this on the podcast, I've said this elsewhere, and you're going to hear it a lot more you're going to hear it a lot more from me this month. I'll just put it that way. One of the biggest stories in IndyCar right now is the rivalry between McLaren and Ganassi. And it is getting Ganasty between those two organizations. I mean, we're not just talking court battles now. We're talking about the fact that it would seem to me that the drivers don't like each other on both of those teams. And from the perspective of a TV show, and by extension, the race broadcast, that's what you should be talking about, especially leading up to the Indy 500, where those were the two dominant teams last year. So when you got 100 Days to Indy TV show and you don't focus on the two teams that are the principal rivals at the Indianapolis 500, sure, if we're talking about the championship, yeah, it's Penske versus Ganassi, and it has been since 2013. But when we're talking about the Indy 500 and we're building up a show to the Indy 500, it's McLaren versus Ganassi, and there's real beef there. You don't have to drive to survive it. That already that has happened. A real life dramatic thing happened between your young star and your old star, driving for two of the biggest and most flashy teams on the grid. So from my perspective, thank you, NBC, for reporting that. Colton, he spells it differently than the other Colton we know. Colton Austin says, great run today by Lundgaard in the 45 team today. Thank you, Colton, for your first super chat. YouTube is telling me that it's your first super chat, which is nice. Lundgaard was spectacular today. In fact, I have, that is my next point actually on my piece of paper. And so that's a great transition. Thank you, super chats, for helping me stay on topic. That's great. I make money and you guys keep me on task. The Christian Lundgaard, he is really showing what he's made of, because we know the deficiencies with the Ray Hall team right now. They're working on it. They're getting better, but they're not there yet. They're getting there, but they're not there yet. So when you see, and we'll look at the results after I make this point, because then it'll get into the discussion about the Stingray Rob caution. When you look at the results page and you see where his teammates are and where Christian Lundgaard is, it's not even close, right? Christian Lundgaard is outperforming his teammates by a massive margin. And I'm curious, I know they've signed him to a multi-year extension, but I wonder which teams may try to go get him. That was very smart by Ray Hall to lock him down. I will say that, because I was so impressed. Something impressed me a lot. Right before he passed Dixon, and it wasn't actually the pass. The pass was great, right? But we saw it a couple times later on in the race. The thing that impressed me was Palou and Dixon were out in front of Lundgaard, and it was right off a pit sequence. Some guys were coming out of the pits. There were guys on various different, levels of rubber and heat of rubber. Right in that fast S curve, right before the final corner. The last S curve before the final corner. I don't know the corner names at Barber. I apologize for that. Lundgaard did something that I thought was so freaking smart. Because Palou and Dixon were out in front of him, creating a lot of dirty air, What Lundgaard did was back off before the high-speed chicane, let Dixon get a little bit ahead of him, and then jabbed back on the throttle. That allowed him to get that big run into the final corner and set Dixon up and pass him. That impressed the hell out of me. In fact, I had not seen anyone else do that at Barber. But that was a high racing IQ move. And I don't think a lot of people, I know the TV didn't pick up on it, and I don't blame them for not picking up on it. It's hectic in there. But that, I thought, was huge driver skill. And it means he's thinking in the cockpit, right? So that impresses me about a driver. When a driver can think through the race, that's a Rick Mears thing he told me, and the one and only time I've been able to talk to Rick Mears. He said something to the effect of, you've got to think through the race. And that's always stuck with me. And so when I see a moment like Christian Lundgaard lifting off the gas to just get a little bit of clean air to get that run on the red tires when he knows those other two cars on blacks, smart. Really smart. Andrew says, do you think we could see a mid-season firing this year? Maybe. I was thinking about that. I don't know specifically who it might be. But I just was sitting there going, because they were interviewing Palou, and I was just kind of thinking, this time last year we had no idea that any of the Palou stuff was going on behind the scenes to a certain extent. And it makes me wonder, because right after Indianapolis, that's when silly season starts. Once we get through the Indy 500, silly season starts, because then you've performed on the biggest stage. You've either performed or not performed on the biggest stage. I think bump day is going to have a huge factor in that. If a full season driver goes home, I think they're probably immediately on the hot seat, I would say. And just in general, if we're talking about full season drivers in the back half of the field for the entire Indy 500, then I would look at them as being on the hot seat. So yeah, I could see it. There are some drivers I think that could step in. You think of Linus Lundqvist. There's been a lot of talk about Scott Bloomquist. There's another IST driver. And Tom Bloomquist is a favorite of Honda, which is interesting. And when you're talking about, we mentioned the Shank stuff earlier, I think a lot of people within the industry think that Tom Bloomquist could be in IndyCar sooner rather than later. So I don't know. We'll have to see. There's a lot of things we could talk about. Let's look at the results first, because we're going to get into spicy territory after this. So, if I can, there we go. And I'm actually going to pull up the page because I cannot read what is on the OBS. So if you're just joining us, the results of the Children's of Alabama Indy Grand Prix at Barber Motorsports Park is Scott McLaughlin winning over Romain Grosjean. And we'll talk about that battle here in a bit, but it was one of the all-time Barber races from a pure, that last half after the caution. And again, we'll talk about the caution here in just a second. But the knockdown drag-out fight between McLaughlin and Romain Grosjean was just fantastic. Will Power, because we probably won't be able to mention him too much later on in this video. I just need to shout him out because Will Power had got that dingo in him, got that dog in him, to say it in an American way, because Will Power drove his nuts off today. There's no doubt about it, because he was something like 17 seconds behind the leaders. He got the gap to 3 seconds. Didn't have the tires at the end of the race to actually catch and pass Romain Grosjean. But damn, when you look at that gap to Pato O'Ward, guess what that gap is? Between Power and O'Ward, that's 17 seconds. So Will Power essentially made up 17 seconds on the racetrack, which is insane. That is insane. Pato O'Ward in 4th position. He's 2nd in the championship. Very interesting that at least going into Indianapolis, it's Pato versus Marcus for the championship. And if you listen to our podcast, I think those are the two drivers that we picked, me and Kyle. So I'm just saying, we know what we're talking about here. Alex Palou in 5th, obviously where he got his first IndyCar win in 2021 and set off his fantastic 2021 season. Palou is one we've got to remember is very strong at the Indianapolis 500. The hype is going to be about Ericsson, and it's going to be about the McLarens and Scott Dixon. Please do not overlook Alex Palou. I'll just say that. Christian Lundgaard, we just were singing his praises. In 6th place, I believe that is the best result for Rahal this year. I think maybe Graham was close at St. Pete, but certainly from a strength, a true pace perspective, that's Rahal's best result this year by a long stretch. Scott Dixon in 7th, we mentioned how he's beefing with Pato O'Ward right now, and that the TV show should absolutely focus on that if they're not already. Alexander Rossi in 8th position for Arrow McLaren. Felix Rosenqvist spun on the first lap of the race. It actually put him on the better strategy. He ended up finishing 9th. I'm telling you, one of these days, Felix is going to win one of these races. It's going to happen one of these days. Marcus Ericsson, the points leader in 10th. Again, just kind of hanging in there. That's all he's got to do on the bad races, the bad days. So his bad days have been 8th and 10th right now. Just to let you know what a strong season Marcus Ericsson is having right now. The Marcus trend continues. Marcus Armstrong, who came from deep in the field, 26th position, damn near last to finish 11th. Marcus Armstrong was my Rookie of the Year pick, and he did actually receive a trophy on NBC for that feat. Long Beach winner Kyle Kirkwood, quiet but good, 12th position. Callum Ilott, 13th place from 15th starting position. Again, a solid drive for the Juncos Hollinger driver, but not something that's super right home about. Colton Herta, tire management was an issue for him today. We saw that. Ditto for Joseph Newgarden, but a lot more of that had to do with the fact that Felix Rosenqvist knocked the rear toe out a little bit. They had a balance issue all day. And Joseph Newgarden, really, he was on the same strategy as Scott McLaughlin. So they should have been right there. Rinus VeeKay was in the top 5 early on. He's been fast here in the past. Not a great day, unfortunately, for Rinus VeeKay. But they're good. The Ed Carpenter Racing Team are good on the Indy road course. And, of course, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the real track. They're going to be good in qualifying. Graham Rahal in 17th spot. Fairly anonymous day for him. I think the most exciting thing that he did on camera was run into Connor Daly. Simon Pagenaud had an off-track excursion. David Malukas, I think they screwed the strategy up a little bit because he was up there and then he wasn't. Santino Ferrucci in 20th. Elio Castroneves had a couple of off-tracks. He's looking forward to getting on the oval at Indianapolis. Benjamin Peterson for AJ Foyt in 22nd. Devlin DeFrancesco in 23rd. Jack Harvey in 24th. Connor Daly in 25th. Augustine Canapino finally had a real bad weekend. Just wasn't quite there. Wasn't quite there this weekend for Augustine. But if that was a bad weekend, it could be worse. Certainly, I would say this is his least spectacular weekend because obviously Long Beach, it was a bad weekend for him. But this one's just a 26th finish and really wasn't seen much on the cameras. And Stingray Robb finishing last with a mechanical failure. I wonder if that's an engine, because if that's an engine and we saw an engine go for Romain Grosjean, we start thinking about 500 miles in May and reliability. We'll see. That will be a talking point, I think, because the only other car that I've seen have an engine failure this year was the Chevy of Joseph Newgarden. So we'll see. Let me see if we didn't miss any super chats while I had another tab up. Steve Kilstock says McLaren took NTT and Kanaan from Ganassi. Ganassi took Taylor Kyle from McLaren. Yes, indeed. There's so many things that we will be talking about going forward with that, because there's even more stuff. I mean, you think about, Marcus Ericsson, for example, was on that team and then was not on that team, and they didn't even try to re-sign him. So there's a lot of things to talk about with that. Stingray Robb's incident, and more importantly, the caution question. Yeah. If it's worthy of being a full course yellow, it should be a full course yellow. I understand that they want to have the happy medium between closing the pits and keeping them open. I understand the safety aspects of sending the crews out on the racetrack when there's the potentiality that someone's going to be flying around the track to go into an open pit. But I think there's also a safety concern when you have a stationary car on the racetrack. Even if it's offline, somebody could theoretically crash into it. So from a safety standpoint, there's pros and cons. But I think the result is it sucks from a strategy standpoint, and it did definitely cost Romain Grosjean a better chance of winning the race. And yeah, it has the optics of benefiting directly the three Penske cars. They've been making these sort of calls regardless of whether Penske's on the right end of the strategy or not. So, like, yeah, I understand why people are concerned about that, but I don't think that's a huge part of it. That was how the cookie crumbles today. The good news, I would say, is the Indy 500, generally speaking, they can't do things like that. Because yellow flags on ovals are almost always a yellow immediately, regardless and unquestionably. And here at a road course, you can kind of get away with fudging it a little bit. But I don't like it from a purity standpoint, for sure. I don't like it, you know. Did it hurt the race? No, thankfully it didn't. I was worried it was going to be processional after that. But we ended up getting a really good battle between Romain Grosjean and Scott McLaughlin. I don't know why I've been saying it the American way. McLaughlin. Glockenspiel. Scott McLaughlin. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, let me know what you guys think. I mean, obviously people were chirping at me throughout the race about it. And I get it. I do get it. I do get why IndyCar does it that way. I think the wave around rule's worse. I think there's two really illegitimate things that they do right now. It's the wave around rule, particularly on the ovals where they give all the guys lap backs, and they wait to throw yellows on the road courses when they're in the middle of a pit sequence. So I don't know. It's tough. It's a tough one. I know there's going to be some people that are very upset that Romain Grosjean did not win his first race today because he was way out in front of everybody else that was on his strategy, but that's the way it goes sometimes. And I will also say it was not the most egregious one we've seen. We've seen other examples of that hesitancy to throw the yellow that are much worse than that, much more questionable. But yeah, I think people are going to be upset about it for sure. Let's actually talk about the Scott versus Romain battle, because I thought it was really good. It seemed like it was going to be a repeat of St. Pete because you had one extra stop, and McLaughlin could use the overcut, could go a little bit longer than Romain could, just the way the strategy worked out. And they came out of the pits together, and Grosjean put, just a hell of a move on McLaughlin in the final corner. You know, the Lundgaard move was high IQ. The Grosjean move was pure nutsack. It was pure balls. Like, you know, he was going for it. And it was, what's funny about it is that it was the exact same scenario, almost the exact same move, beat for beat, as St. Pete. Scott McLaughlin chose not to crash them this time. That's really what it came down to. And he was rewarded for it. Because what was interesting about what happened with Romain Grosjean was, and I know he ran out of push to pass. I've debated a bit in the past. In fact, I debated during Long Beach about the real effect of push to pass over the course of the race. But I think he also burned his tires off. or at least he was overdriving the car. It's one of the two things. I don't want to put it on Roman that it was totally his fault, but for whatever reason, it looked like he was struggling quite a bit, to keep the tires underneath him, and Scott McLaughlin was not, and putting pressure on Roman, and Roman started making mistakes. The tail started to get happy. Coming out of turn 3, he put a wheel on the grass, and then obviously the big mistake where he went wide into the braking zone. Scott got underneath him, and that was essentially game over from there. I've seen some people say Roman choked. Was it a choke? Again, it's hard to say because they were on slightly different strategies, and Grosjean was the fastest driver of his strategy choice by a long way. He was not on the preferred strategy for the way the race played out, which is another interesting point to think about. It did seem like, though, he was overdriving a little bit. It was strange. I don't know. It was an odd one for sure. But I thought the battle between Scott and Roman was absolutely awesome. Absolutely awesome. That was IndyCar at its best. Like I said at the beginning, IndyCar's 4 for 4 on races this year. I think if you can find me 4 better races in the first 4 races in any other series, please let me know. I would like to watch it because this was great. This has been a great season of IndyCar racing. The on-track product is as good as we could possibly be hoping for right now. And I hope that continues into the month of May. There's some questions, obviously, about the Indianapolis 500. We know the GP. Essentially, we're doing a rain dance. If we can get the rain going at the GP, it'll be good. If we don't get the rain going, it's going to be boring as hell. And that's just how it goes. That's a 2-day commitment. It's fine. We'll talk about ovals anyway. I've been called a lot of things, Owl. A corporate shill I've never been called before. You might want to ask some corporate shills what they think of me. I'll just put it that way. Now I'm feeling good. Let me know. I will say that for the most part, I think we're pretty good talking about this race. I guess I'll preview a little bit of month of May content before we go off the air. If you have any super chats, now's the time. But yeah, now it's up to you, chat. You get to determine where this goes for the next few minutes. But I will say this. Man, I'm looking forward to May. There's just a different vibe. It feels like I get a lot more energy. I know I bring my A game, I have to say, to the month of May in Indianapolis. And that's all passion. And that's all the fact that you guys watch and tune in and appreciate what goes on this channel. It's going to be good. I'm throwing a lot of extra effort into May this year. We are doing, again, the problem is that I have realized now, and it's not a bad problem to have, but I do realize that when I do something related to IndyCar racing and it's innovative or good and, whatever, I notice it influences others. We'll put it that way. Which is fine. That's the free and open market. I don't have a problem with that. But, I can't share with you guys everything we're doing because I'm worried that other people will try to do it and do it worse. So I think we are going to have a fantastic month of content for you guys in terms of Indy 500 content. We're doing some innovative stuff, particularly from a sports coverage standpoint on YouTube. And we really are only we are a 3-man team for this. I had tried, I won't go into too much detail. I had tried to bring in some extra firepower for the month. It didn't quite work this year. But I'm definitely looking to the future in a lot of ways. Because obviously auto racing, the landscape is changing, and particularly IndyCar racing is changing. And I want to be on top of it when it does. So thank you, Andrew Quarterly, for a British. Is that a pound or a euro? I think it's a euro. Thank you, Andrew. Regardless, excuse me. No, I think we're on for a really good month of May, and the month of May I think is when I do my best work, when this channel does its best work, when the folks who come and help me out do our best work. And hopefully it will set the tone going forward for where I want to take this channel, what we want to do with it, and kind of be a proof of concept going forward. Because, my goal at the end of the day is to help grow racing, grow IndyCar racing. And, we want to be in the best position to do that. So hopefully you guys will like it. It'll be fun. I can't wait. Again, if you haven't heard, and if you haven't seen yet, I've got a video premiering tomorrow afternoon. I guess it's noon Eastern, which unfortunately will go right up against the NASCAR race, but I don't even care because a NASCAR race is starting at noon, so that's fine. It's a really good trailer for Indy 500 month. I've been doing that for a while. And I think it does a really good job of being a hype video. It's only a minute long. Like, don't expect like the huge videos will be later in the month. It's going to be a lot of work, but it's going to be rewarding work because I know how much the Indy 500 not only means to me, but it means to all of you guys. And it's going to be good. So yeah, look for our trailer tomorrow afternoon. And then we're going to be getting on with it. Couple more super chats here real quick. MSF Racing says, here's a little tip for all the great content. And thank you very much. I appreciate that. Colton Austin says, what team have you been most impressed with and most disappointed with so far? Most impressed, I would say, off the top of my head, I'm going to say Andretti Autosport. Yeah, I think Andretti Autosport stepped it back up this year. They look pretty good. Most disappointed in, but it's got to be Shank, man. It's got to be Shank. That's been a fall off this year. There's no doubt about it. Cole says, I'm just upset IndyCar is risking the safety of the drivers because they don't want to Rossi to cry on his podcast. Safety should come first in IndyCar. So I'm going to need a little more context on that one. What is Rossi crying about on his podcast? I apologize. That's like the one like I don't listen to a lot of like racing podcasts, believe it or not. I have my own racing podcast, the David Land podcast. You should tune in and give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. But I don't listen to the Bro Down, Hinch and Rossi. What is that called? It's not called the Bro Down. It should be called the Bro Down. Off Track. That's it. Off Track with Hinch and Rossi. So I don't know what he said there. But yeah, I don't know. Andrew Quarterly. Again, another Euro. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Did you finally get one of them diecast? I got a lot of them diecast. I got too many of them diecast. That's for sure. That is for sure. Yeah. Oh, the month of May's coming back. Like tomorrow's May. I'm so excited. We got 34 cars. That's the other thing I think that's going to be fun. I did see that the Colts drafted Anthony Richardson. How do I feel about it? I feel positive. Cautiously optimistic would be my word. He's not the stereotypical Colts quarterback, that's for sure. But he's an athletic freak of nature, and I think he's going to pair well with Jonathan Taylor. So I think the Colts are going to be fun, and that's something we haven't been able to say about the Colts since they lost Andrew Luck. Okay, let me see if I can say this. That's a tough. Okay. That is a David. You're trying to get David in trouble. Super chat. Enoch Sosh. I will be very careful with answering this because you've asked it's a legitimate question. But I don't know if I can answer it right now because we don't know. He's asking what will happen when Roger passes. So the thing is, since Roger Penske took it over, like everyone knows, and he addressed it right the minute he bought the track, was like everyone, the first question, the first thought everybody had was when Roger bought it, great, Roger bought the track. And then the second one was, what is the line of succession? Roger Penske knows that. Roger Penske has his plans and affairs in order. I'm sure of it. Do we know exactly what that means? I don't know. I hope we don't need to worry about that for a little while. Andrew actually has a question because he keeps super chatting, and Andrew has a question just below. What do you think of? Why do you think? So I appreciate that, Andrew. I'm sorry I missed your actual question. Why do you think Jack Harvey has struggled so much since leaving Meyer Shank? Part of it is him being at Ray Hall. Part of it is lack of confidence, I think. And sometimes just when you don't have results for a long period of time, it stacks up. And I think that's what's happened with Jack Harvey. I don't think there's one specific thing that you can quote unquote fix with Jack Harvey. It's just that the results haven't been there, and that just spirals things out of control, I think. So we'll see. I would say, I don't know. I guess we'll see. We'll see what happens, because he's not really that far off of Graham. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to... The Ray Hall team is going to be one that's going to be curious going into the silly season, what they end up doing. I'll be very curious about that. Roger Penske has several kids. He has 3 sons and a daughter. I would say that Greg, who is... I don't remember if it's his eldest son, but he's one of his older sons. Greg Penske is definitely the guy who seems to be fit to be the guy, the next guy, because he's always around. He's fairly quiet in the public. I know I've talked to some people who have personal relationships with Greg Penske. I've obviously never met Greg myself. I would like to, because I suspect that Greg's going to be the guy that we are going to have to, or he's going to be the guy who takes over when the time comes. But I don't know much about Greg Penske. The most glowing thing I've heard about Greg Penske, which I thought was interesting, was that they said he's like Roger. If Roger was, if someone went back in time and grabbed Roger out of 1972. And I said, okay, sold. So we'll see. We'll see. Okay. Well, month of May next. Are you guys excited? I know I'm excited. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, appreciate you tuning in. I hope you'll enjoy the Indy 500 month intro tomorrow. Podcast on Tuesday. Wednesday got a special video. Then I think there's a day off. Then I think I've got another video coming on Friday. Couple days off. Podcast, video, GP. Lots of stuff happening. And then, of course, the real stuff starts. The left turns begin. We like that. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.